Hi, it's Dr. Pavanka. I want to talk a little bit about food therapy with Chinese medicine. So we talked a little bit about prescription diets and food as medicine with our Western medicine, but going over to more of our integrative approach with traditional Chinese medicine, we do also have food therapy where we look at what pattern the pet has, because we do have very detailed patterns of different things that we see as far as medical conditions, but sometimes they're even more subtle than that, and we might not think they have a pattern, but they do. One of the most common ones I see is a heat pattern. It's one that my dog likes to have, where she just can't seem to get cool enough. She doesn't really want to lay in any snuggly covers. She wants to be on the cold floor. She wants to go out and sit in the snow. She just runs hot. It's kind of similar to women in menopause where they have hot flashes and they can't get cool. And this could very easily be a yin deficiency depending on what pattern. There are kind of some false heats too that we see where we have an excess with the yang, which is the heat. But depending on what pattern, we can kind of play around and see what we can do with the food. I honestly don't like to switch them all the way over to a home cooked or a raw or anything like that, just because I do want to make sure that everything's balanced and complete, because it's very, very difficult to correctly balance a home cooked diet. And a lot of times it's basically doing a study with your dog being the test subject, because we're trying to make sure that everything is complete and balanced. And there's a lot of money that goes behind making sure those kibble brands are complete and balanced. That said, kibble does have a very warming effect with Chinese food therapy theory. So a lot of times we are kind of doing more food toppers with this. I don't like raw food in general, just because it is a public safety problem as far as you can get bacteria from that, because even human grade meats, we do typically cook before we eat. So I always worry a little bit about bacteria with the raw foods, and even with most dogs, if you can just lightly cook it, that a lot of times helps with the digestibility too, because we might not have everything as easily digestible with those. So I typically go more for a balanced and complete food, and then I use my food therapy as a food topper so that I have that additional benefit of the Chinese food therapy in addition to that balanced and complete diet. Kind of similar to, if you know, large animals will do balanced rations, which are basically a supplement that covers all of their additional needs so that they can be on their pasture and they don't necessarily have too much else that they're getting, because a lot of times we do have that quick balance as far as we need everything to cover what they need energy wise, but we don't want them gaining extra weight. And it's very hard with a lot of the home cooked diets and with adding food toppers to keep their weight under control, because one chicken breast might not have the same stuff in it as another chicken breast, even if they're in the same packaging and selling in the same tray even. So a lot of times it is harder to get as detailed and as tight of a understanding as far as what's in the pet's food. But we do have patterns that we look at, and I have my little cheat sheet here that I got when I was going through my acupuncture program. But we look at the different qualities behind the different foods. There are some that can help with different problems, as far as if we do need to tonify yin, tonify yang, drain damp, and then stagnation. In Chinese medicine, stagnation is the cause of pain. If we don't have things moving, that's where the pain is. And with stagnation, we do have things that can help with the stagnation. In general, a lot of times I like to think of the warming foods as foods that we would eat in the winter, kind of more like Thanksgiving foods. You have your chicken, your venison, mutton, and a lot of times when we go over to our veggies and fruits, it's more like ginger and different things like that, whereas the cooling foods are more like our crab, oyster, fish, things like that, and the fruit or cucumber or watermelon, things like that. If you do have an interest in Chinese food therapy, there are tons of resources out there. I would recommend, if you're interested in looking for something for your pet, you can go on to Chi University's website, and there is a list of all the different certified practitioners who okayed them to put them on that list. So that is a valuable resource because it is a good way to work on things. I have to say I didn't go for that certification, but I have dabbled with it because you learn quite a bit through some of the other courses, like the acupuncture course. And I actually have had dogs that, the one that made the biggest turnaround that I noticed is I gave her a list, and of course I always tell people when I send the list home that it is the complete list, and if there's anything on there that looks a little bit like maybe a dog shouldn't have it, let me know, because I do have stuff on there the horses can have too, and other animals, so not everything is for every patient, and I try to make sure I mark which ones are safe for your pet. But definitely I encourage people, if there's any questions, to let me know so I can make sure that I didn't miss one. But with that, this one patient was one of those dogs with a heat pattern. He didn't want to be in the carpeted room with mom, and she started feeding the cooling foods as a food topper, and all of a sudden he was comfortable coming in the carpeted room and sitting with his mom, and really got to spend more quality time with her that way. So that was one of the ones I saw that was kind of more dramatic, because I don't do too much with food therapy, but it is a very strong area of interest for me. So I do like looking at food as therapy, because a lot of times it really is. So do let me know if you have any questions. That's just kind of a quick crash course in Chinese medicine, food therapy that we use in our veterinary patients.